live from Birken Forest Monastery. An opportunity for questions and answers. This is a marvelous opportunity through the YouTube and the web around the world. This is quite unique to our times, that I can speak to so many people in different places, and that you can just tune in at your time zone when you wish to, etc. So quite marvelous opportunity. Buddhism in modernity. I'm Ajahn Sona. So let's begin with our first question. Pia.
Ajahn, our first question is from Ali from White Plains, New York, United States. The term, quote, mind seems a bit vaguely defined. It seems to transcend the five aggregates. Is the purified, unconditioned mind the same as nibana?
So this question, I need to help listeners who are not familiar with this type of question. This is a advanced knowledge. So Buddhism, the Dhamma, the teachings, the historical teachings of the Buddha talk about a human as five aggregates, five elements that are put together, and the body is one of them. Feelings are another, perception, consciousness, and volition. So basically in two dimensions, the body, and then the abstract experiences of feeling, and then what the mind does, perception, awareness, consciousness, and decision-making, volitions. So this is how the Buddha analyzes a human, and that is the, again and again he says, that is the totality, that is the full experience of what a human is. This is the all. And outside of this, one can find nothing. Now this is a subjective experience of what a human is. The human experiences the world, and the Buddha tends to be concerned really with the subjective experience of the world that a human has. And they may have sights and sounds and smells and tastes and touches and ideas, mental operations. And that's, the Buddha talks about, the world arises with conscious contact with it. So the abstract world, the world of physics, that sort of objective world apparently out there that nobody can actually understand except either theoretically through physics, but subjectively we all experience it. So the Buddha is interested in this human experience of reality, of life and the world. So that's, first of all, Ali is asking about the, is that all? Are these five categories, five divisions that we make of a human, when we put them together, that's, the Buddha again and again says, that's the all. Now you seem to have an issue here in Buddhist history and Buddhist discussions about, is there something beyond that that is the transcendental kind of type of consciousness, which is none of those five aggregates, or is above them, beyond them somehow? And this is, a philosophical argument back and forth at various times in Buddhist history. And to this day, so we have contemporary monks advocating for one side or another, that there is some sort of other factor of consciousness or mind or something like this, which is separate from those five khandhas or beyond the five khandhas. And other monks say, no, it's very clear. The Buddha was very articulate and never expressed that. So that's, I want to just articulate that for everybody, that there are various sides, even amongst monks who are familiar with the entire collection of the sutas. They advocate on one side or another. So this is not an obvious kind of question, and it's not an obvious kind of answer to it. I would say, though, that a simple answer like, yeah, there's this special mind, which is the nibana mind, it's somehow identical with nibana, etc. It's just way too easy. And it's something that the Buddha could have said easily, just bluntly like that, and he didn't. So if he couldn't articulate this, then I don't think we need to act as a kind of interpreter, thinking that the Buddha was unable to. The Buddha himself says he's the foremost teacher. No other teacher is comparable to him. And that no monk or other, any form of literature, etc., that his teachings are put in will be equivalent to his own articulation of this. So we have to say that if it could be said in so many words, the Buddha would have said it. He does use some words, one of them would be translated as unthinkable or incalculable. And certain topics are incalculable. For instance, is the universe infinite or finite? In space, infinite or finite in time? In other words, does it have a beginning or is it beginningless? Such questions, he says, are unthinkable, achintya, and to be set aside as not profitable. Other types of concepts, the condition of a person, a being, a fully enlightened being after death, are the types of possibilities within the realm of logic, are not adequate to talk about what happens at the end of life of a fully enlightened person. So I think my own approach to this is to just be content with that and not have to express the inexpressible or talk the unspeakable. There's a saying by, I think it's Bertrand Russell, what can't be said, and can't be whistled either. So I'm content to leave it that way, because when people try to push it, it slips out of the grasp. Now, there are words that people use, but unfortunately, the words may not have a lot of content to them. So you can talk about awareness itself or consciousness, it's without an object. Say, here's a phrase that's commonly used, consciousness without an object or awareness itself, things like this. But the more you try to imagine what exactly is meant by that, try to imagine consciousness itself or consciousness without an object, you run out of, you have, nothing comes to mind. It sounds like it expresses something, consciousness itself. But when normally we think of consciousness being a sight, a sound, a smell, a taste, an idea, a feeling, a consciousness of something. Does it express anything when we talk about consciousness itself? Does it express a form of existence or an imaginable anything? In modern times, say in the 20th century, this is kind of what Western philosophy has gone to, is analysis of language and whether certain types of expressions of language actually have any content to them. So this modern language philosophy. And sometimes I think people might feel that they're expressing something with language, but when we try to visualize them or understand it, it is impossible. You know, I can talk about a square triangle, I can talk about a square circle as well. But when we try to imagine this, we fail. So the saying there is such a square circle or a square triangle is language without content. So I tend to set aside these ultimate, very, very subtle questions and just be content with the expressions that the Buddha gave. And he did say that the five khandhas is the all. Outside of that, it is unimaginable, etc. So that's where I would leave this discussion. And I would suggest to most people not to waste too much time trying to chew through this, because a lot of people have spent a lot of time on this. And I even have, put in some years trying to, and occasionally written myself an essay about it, trying to settle this once and for all. And I've really take a different position now. Is like, leave it, if it's unthinkable, if it's unimaginable, etc., just set it aside. It would be better to devote your time to more practical processes on the path. So the process of meditation, of understanding Dhamma, is a better use of time. And then experientially is the only, we'll all be left, if we manage to attain full enlightenment, we'll be left with an experience. Yes. So I hope that articulates it a bit. Very difficult thing to discuss. Pia, next question.
Ajahn, our next question is from the live feed from John from Toronto. Ajahn, I've been practicing and studying for quite some time and have seen significant positive changes in my, quote, conscious life. However, I seem to have dreams that are dark and even evil, completely unrelated to my everyday thoughts and current life. Perhaps past life karma or memories? How does one tackle something so deeply rooted, since it still surfaces with everyday practice and sila?
Yeah, I wouldn't concern myself too much with that. I think this is what I've learned at the monastery, and I've been in monasteries now for 30 as a monk for 32 years, and previously, total of at least 40 years around monasteries and spending time in them and so forth. And and I've been an abbot for the last 25 of those. And so I've taught, and I talk to a lot of people who are in monasteries in meditation retreats or staying even months at a time, lay people and monks. And there's a frequent occurrence is that people come to me and have had some startling dreams while they're in the monastery. So that they're in there for a week long or 2 weeks of something or some months in it. And they kind of have some very vivid and quite surprising dreams that they might not normally have. And quite often they're rather dark. Violence and all kinds of things are happening. And at first I wondered about this, but as I got told this story more and more, I began to ask them about the tone, like was the emotional tone in the dream. And quite often it would be, although it would be a kind of horrific dream, slaughter and all kinds of stuff, it would have a kind of a not over-emotional kind of reaction to it. And so I started to think that, it's probably that the unconscious or subconscious mind wants to look at certain things, but normally suppresses it and doesn't allow it into a dream because it's not ready for it. And perhaps when you start practicing and you're stabilizing in your conscious daily life, then the difficult possibilities of life, and of course life, anything can happen. We're in a world right now that is 2 years into a worldwide pandemic. And I understand there's just recently a war going on as well. So you can imagine that life and death can intrude into your life at any time. Severe accidents, injuries, diseases, the loss of people, the loss of your own life, anything can happen at any time. The world can be a horror show. And it can intrude at any time. And the mind, part of our minds knows this, but suppresses it. And then, but in dreams, the truth comes out. We know. Now, I think in dreams we're trying to process it. We're trying to process and release some of our fears and maybe look at the truth. And so that's sometimes these dark, frightening dreams are actually signs of growing health and confidence, that we can allow ourselves to look at it, that we're feeling safe enough to see the true nature of life, and that it's a slaughterhouse. Ultimately, it is. Everybody dies in this one, and so this is something that we're actually training ourselves to look at. And as a monk, I've been sent to contemplate decaying corpses. In some of the monasteries in Thailand I was at, they would regularly bring a corpse in and leave it in an open grave, and we would spend entire nights alone with this corpse, watching it decompose. And it's equivalent to a 12-hour horror show. But how do you feel about this? After all, this is obvious truth. This is part of life, isn't it? I mean, it's everything. It happens every day. It happens all the time, and that's what happens to a body. And that's an explicit contemplation subject that the Buddha asks monks to do. Go to a charnel ground where corpses are cast upon the ground and watch what happens sitting amongst them, the bloating and the maggots and then eventually animals come and pull the limbs off and so forth. This is reality, my friends. And so the mind is trying to process this in dreams, and it's not always unhealthy. The fact that you're having nightmares and so forth, not always unhealthy. One of the things that one should do is in conscious waking life is to recollect the fact of death and the fact of uncertainty and the possibilities of dreadful diseases, and try to keep your courage together, keep your equanimity together, and to face reality without fear. And this can go right into your unconscious mind as well. And then also to practice loving kindness, especially before going to sleep, and see if it changes the quality of your dreams. So loving kindness is a feeling of safety. And so the dreams will also change. You will feel safe. Even if you bring up what we might call disturbing imagery of death and violence and so forth, you will feel emotionally stable in the midst of the dream. So this is a very interesting phenomenon that happens to people. So I hope a bunch of other people who are watching this, who are meditators and have spent time and been maybe disturbed by these dreams and think they're not succeeding, it's sometimes a sign of progress. These difficult, disturbing dreams are a sign of progress, that the mind is actually able to face some of the issues of truth about life. So thanks for that question. Next, Pia.
Our next question is from John in Twickenham, Middlesex, UK. In a recent live stream, you described death as a transition when we are booted out of the body without anything. Is this transition from body to body what carries over? Is it the unfinished habits, programs and patterns, sankharas?
Well, we need a model of reality to work with. And one model which is used for deconstructing the world is that the world is made out of little parts, and all these little parts fit together and make the world. The other way to look at the world is as a liquid or a flow, and that's a different way of looking at the world. And so the deeper we inquire, even in modern physics, the deeper we look into each, we used to talk about atoms as a kind of the constructors of the universe, the little particles. But the deeper we looked into it, the particles turned out to be multi-faceted, all kinds of other little dimensions and so forth, and then they become wavicles, and then finally it turns into just a blur of energy. And so this is actually going back to the early philosophers, both in India and Greece. So there's two kinds of philosophers in the Greek tradition. One is Heraclitus, who proclaimed that the universe is nothing but flow. It's all it is flow itself. And then another philosopher named Democritus, who analyzed it as atoms and space. So atoms being the uncuttables, that which is indivisible, a small particle indivisible, and the rest is empty space. So you have two choices here. But the one that describes the Buddhist idea best is that the world and you, all beings and the universe, are processes. They are flowing processes. So one stream is emptying into another stream. One life is emptying liquid flow into another. Not all the information from the previous life is poured into the next life. Some will remain suppressed or repressed in the next life. Some will surface. This is not all that strange. This is basically the idea of genetics as well. How do a couple transfer their gene structures into another being? How does it happen? The conjunction of sperm and egg, and this is genetic. But do all of the genes, is it strictly genetic? No. Apparently the genetics respond to the environment around it, and some of them never manifest. Some of the potentials of the gene never manifest. And so this is the same. We have this in modern genetics, as they did in the time of the Buddha with the idea of rebirth. So it is a flow, it is a transference of information, but it's not 100%. Parts are dropped and left out. And because it's a process, there are causes and effects, multiple causes and effects going on at once, and some of them are being discharged and ending, and others are being initiated and beginning a series of persistence, which will also end. So it's kind of like a rope with the fibers are all twined together, intertwined together, overlapping, but no single fiber goes to the end of the rope. Maybe a single fiber goes only a few inches, but it's wrapped in the next one. And so this is kind of a very complex process, and the Buddha was very clear that this is a mind-boggling complexity to the process of what it is that persists and goes on. But he encourages you to say it's very complex, but it's not unworkable. So the work is generosity, kindness, and clarity have positive results in accord with generosity and kindness and clarity. And greed, hatred, and delusion have results in accord with their negative elements of greed, hatred, and delusion. So in the midst of that, you can't give precise analysis of every thing that's going to transfer, but the general idea is just put in the causes of generosity, kindness, and clarity, and the results will be positive, will be good. So that is a brief answer to a very complex issue. I could talk for days on this. Pia.
Our next question is from the live feed from Michael in Brighton, UK. What do you think is an optimum weekly meditation schedule would be? What do you think an optimum weekly meditation schedule would be for a single lay practitioner who, after 20 years of practice, has suddenly started to get some peace and a little bliss from meditation?
Well, there is no perfect schedule. There's no cookie cutter that I can apply to each person. And that's one of the reasons for, getting to know a teacher and talking about your life. So, I get to know people over time. I've given, I famously say, 10,000 one-on-one interviews, and it's more than 10,000 for sure. But I get to know a person. I ask them about their history. I ask them about their life, all kinds of things, and how they're doing, and how their experiences are, and what meditations work for them, and etc. So this is the kind of answer that I have to give. But if you're starting to get something, by the way, sometimes it takes 20 years to start to feel the sunshine come out, But what you should do is just enjoy it. And the more you enjoy it, the more you will do it. And in fact, you will come to the place where you can't live without it. So you will incline to meditate more. And you will incline to also avoid certain kind of situations that are not conducive to peace and well-being. And you will incline to spend more time with peaceful, uplifting, positive, and energizing people and ideas. And you will also increase the enjoyment of solitude and unstimulated time as well. So it's hard for most people to understand this, but really, when your mind is well and happy and at peace, you can really be in a fairly empty room for extended periods of time without any activity going on, and you feel just fine. That kind of situation panics most people. They just want to run away from an empty room. That's why they come home from work, they immediately turn on a television or something, because an empty room is almost terrifying. So the meditator starts to appreciate empty rooms, quiet rooms. Maybe sit by the window, watch the trees sway a little bit, the clouds. That's enough. That's a good movie. So if you're starting to experience a more enlivened and joyful state of ordinary being, and that is a very great accomplishment, is to be sort of unreasonably happy, apparently for no reason. Of course, the real reason is that you have practiced meditation, and the mind becomes able to, its nature is to be actually joyful without needing external support. So that's the nature of the mind. If we can get back to its nature, that kind of joy and ease will start to pervade your life, even in the most ordinary times. So just trust yourself to that you will want to increase that and spend more time cultivating it, and you will know when it's time to get up from your sitting and when it's time to just enjoy the sitting.
Ajahn, our next question is from Cheryl from Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, United States. I'm reading the collected teachings of Ajahn Chah and enjoy learning about Vinaya. How has it been adapted into Western monasteries? Are robes still made using jackfruit wood as dye?
That's Sharon?
Cheryl.
Mm-hmm. And where is she from?
Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, United States.
Well, okay, Cheryl. You're quite the scholar there, reading the collected works of Ajahn Chah. They're substantial. And the life story of Ajahn Chah is a huge book as well. I don't know what it is, 800 pages long or something. So you're already special in that you're systematically reading this and interested in this. And very few people ask me about Vinaya, but that's an interesting question as well. Vinaya are the rules of conduct for monks. It's the boundaries. It's more or less a monastery that you carry with you anywhere in the world. When you think of monasteries, or monks, quite often you think of in the West of Benedictine monks or Augustinian monks or whatever, and they live in a monastery, and they follow rules in that monastery. But Buddhist monks are not confined to a specific monastery, so they're not quarantined in a monastery. They have a set of numerous rules. The basics are 227 rules. There's actually more than 500, but just the basic rules are for a monk are 227, and they prescribe and proscribe your life. There are things that you're allowed to do and things you're not allowed to do, and they dictate all aspects of your life, and you carry that around whether you're in a monastery or outside of a monastery. So that's just for general information for people. Now, to get to the specific question, in that area of northeast Thailand, the Isan, we did indeed use jackfruit wood and laboriously to sew your robes and dye your robes. At the time of Ajahn Chah, it was all hand stitching. By the time I got there, it was a treadle sewing machine from 1920, which was quite an advance. And now, apparently, like the young monks, even in North American monasteries, are back to, they prefer to actually hand sew their robes. And they're actually interested in natural dyes as well. And they're collecting bark from trees and all kinds of, onion skins and things like that, because jackfruit is local to the Northeast, and it's not a Vinaya matter. And robes actually can be just artificial dye. They can be various materials as well. There's no real absolute, authentic, jackfruit dyed robe and so forth. I must say, though, that jackfruit dye is quite something. It's an amazing thing, and you can wear. We're only allowed to wash our robes every 2 weeks in the cold season. That's all we have to wear. So you're wearing the same robe for 2 weeks. And in the hot season, we were allowed to wash them once a week. And you wash them. You never wash them in soap. You wash them in a kind of a jackfruit dye in a very with boiling water and jackfruit added, and that's how you wash it. And that material will stay fresh for much longer than any kind of soap that you can possibly use. It smells. You put it on, and it feels like you're wearing a fruit salad. It's a lovely, delicious smell, pristine, antibacterial, and it's amazing, beautiful, very, very beautiful. But it doesn't mean that you can't use artificial dyes or dyes made from other things as well. But that's an interesting question, and it really gets down to there is a culture of arts and crafts within the monastery that the monks learn. Next.
Next question is from the live feed from Suzanne. Hello, Ajahn. What would be the Buddhist response to this invasion of Ukraine by Russia?
Well, the Buddhist response, this is not new. This is long before the Buddha arose in the 5th century BC. Wars were common and invasions were common. And while the Buddha was alive and walking around, wars took place. And he of course, advised against war. And he was an advisor to several kings at the time. And at the time, 2 kingdoms went to, one of them went to war with another, and it was primarily over water rights. And the Buddha attempted to prevent the army from invading, and by sitting on the side of the road under a tree, and then as the army was moving towards the next kingdom, they stopped because they recognized the Buddha, and they went over and had a chat, and the Buddha talked them out of invading. But there were strong forces pushing for that. And one of the things he said to them was, which is more valuable, water or blood? And that's an incredible thing. What are they fighting over? Some sort of cultural thing, a heritage, land, or this and that. But what's more valuable? You're talking about human destruction of humans here. So, of course, the Buddhist attitude is always towards peace, never advocates war, and always towards non-killing, and towards, peaceful resolutions to this. So it's unlikely that that either side will listen to me. I don't think Vladimir Putin is watching my live stream at this moment, but if he is, just remember that. Which is more valuable, blood or water? Blood or oil, maybe. So we do have bloody wars over oil. We have it, and perhaps in the future we'll have it over water as well. Oil is not worth human blood, and money is not worth human blood either. So it's not hard. Our prescription is find ways to resolve these things without violence, but it's, again, very unlikely that anybody's going to listen to this monk. And now, so this war is underway, and but how should you feel about it? Should you be gripped with distress? And I don't think you should be. It's not that we don't care. It's just that when we burden ourselves with heavy sadness and fear, and we desperately want them to stop and so forth, it is not particularly useful, and you only kind of burden yourself. So you have to understand, negative emotions are not felt there. They don't know or care about your negative emotions. So you might as well not have your negative emotions. But if you can do anything positive, fine. And quite often you can't do anything for them, the Ukrainians or the Russians, but you can do something for your immediate family, for instance. So if you can make a nice breakfast for your kids or for your friends, or do anything positive, that's positive contribution to the world. So negative things are going on in the world, but you can do positive things, and you don't have to even cross the street to do positive things. And you can start with yourself and unburden yourself with these heavy emotions, and then share, be generous and kind and lucid with others around you, and that's something. That's something positive for the world. Yes. Okay.
The next question is from Anonymous in Ohio, United States. My husband and I have a 4-year-old daughter. He is interested in having another child. I feel less sure. I love my daughter, but worry about how another child will impact meditation practice. Over the past year, I have also enjoyed celibacy as a practice. In a talk, you once encouraged mothers to, quote, get into it, which I have found to be helpful. How can we make such a big decision in line with our Dhamma practice and current householder life?
Well, that's exactly what the decision you need to make, and it will be, you're not obliged to have another child, and, your husband would like one, and you would prefer not to have one. And so you each get a vote, and the vote is stalemated. But it's your body, so you get to win the vote. And yeah, so there is a beauty and enjoyment in the celibate life. And sometimes, if you're married, then your spouse wasn't expecting this. It's a little bit of a surprise. By the way, no sex. So this is might come as a shock or a disappointment or something like that. So that's part of the process, but it's also part of the fact of, as you progress spiritually, you have different values. You just change, and if your mate is not moving in that direction, you quite often grow apart, and sometimes you literally have to be apart. This happens again and again in history, and we have some very interesting stories from the time of the Buddha with kings and queens. So one of the disciples of the Buddha was a king, and his wife, the queen, they started to meditate. And pretty soon, that's all they really wanted to do. And they had a little meditation garden on the top of the palace and so forth, and they end up spending most of their time up there just meditating. And this happens to people. There are a number of stories of kings who left the palace and became monks. And royalty, of course, the Buddha's aunt was royalty. And she was the first nun. She left the palace as well and became a nun. And so, people, and in Buddhist culture, we don't consider, marriage is not a lifetime vow. It's not even, monks, by the way, do not perform marriages. Buddhist monks do not perform marriages. And marriage is left to, it's thought of as a social convention, and various types of relationships occur in human history. And this version we have in the West is a legacy from Christianity, monogamy and lifetime, the vow to get married and remain so for life, and all of these things. These are Christian traditions. It's done very differently in other cultures. And Buddhism doesn't have any particular form like that. So, and we regard the spiritual aspiration as a higher aspiration than remaining in a committed relationship. It's actually a transcending that, and that if a person is of that nature, is spiritually inclined, they may wish to leave this kind of relationship idea, and that is a step beyond domestic bliss. So this society is of two minds about it. Of course, it's only recently that there's been a big shift in the idea of committed relationships and marriages and so forth. So a lot of the society is still catching up to this, and there's a lot of confusion and guilt and all of this kind of stuff about it. But in Buddhism, like, the spiritual aspiration trumps the marriage commitment idea is a higher value. But you may have pressures from family and spouses and all this kind of stuff, and there's tension involved for many people in this. So because Buddhist ideas are still just making their way into the Western culture now. But if you have the higher spiritual aspiration, you must understand it is a higher aspiration. It's not a failing, it's a higher aspiration from the Buddhist point of view. Yeah.
The next question is from the live feed from Allison. Ajahn, in the sutta in which, quote, the seeing is just the seeing, hearing just hearing, etc., can you give details on the meaning of, quote, the cognizing is just cognizing? How does this differ from ordinary knowing?
Yes, this is a sutta, and many people like this sutta because it seems to be instant enlightenment without too much work. I think it's Bahia is the character in this sutta. And Bahia seems to get enlightened in a very brief moment of time. The Buddha gives him a teaching, and he says to Bahia, in the seeing, let there just be this, in the sight, just let there be the seeing, and in the hearing, just let there be hearing, in the sound, the smell, and the taste, and the touch, and in the thought, just let there be that. Now that sounds like what is that? It's just like that doesn't tell you very much. But what is meant there is that no emotional entanglement is, there's no proliferation of emotions around sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, and thought processes. And that's very difficult to do. Most, if you see an unwanted sight, you either you jump for joy, or you run in horror, or you're neutral about it. And it's bad sounds you don't like, and good sounds you like and love. So he's telling Bahia that you're more or less like an empty movie theater. There's a movie playing in there, but there's no audience. Now, Bahia gets this right away, and he becomes an arahant. He becomes fully enlightened. So this is obviously for some sort of person who's just on the edge of enlightenment to process. To get enlightenment from that simple teaching is quite a feat, a virtuoso feat. But if you understand the backstory of Bahia was a hermit for many years, living under a tree and wearing bark clothing. He was one determined character, and he thought he was enlightened. And it was obviously a very, very disciplined person. He was living in isolation as a hermit and so forth, but he didn't quite get it. And the Buddha said, he could see that this guy had a lot of potential, but he needed a little clarification. And it was just that clarification. So that story is really to show that there are people who are very much on the way there, very highly self-disciplined, but they just need a few words, a turning phrase to get the full idea, and the light goes on. So although it sounds a very nice way, because it really eliminates a lot of complexities, for that to take place and for that to be your full practice I think it's only for a few people, actually. Sorry to disappoint you. So, but the Eightfold Path is the best teaching for everybody. And so to explore fully the Eightfold Path, and it's a gradual training, and it will train your mind, and you will train your speech and your actions, and your understanding will increase, and eventually you will transform. You will feel transformations. But for most people, it's a very gradual process like that. Yeah.
Ajahn, this question is from Laura from Spain. It seems like every time I read the suttas, feelings of anxiety and pressure arise in me, always feeling not good enough for the standard the Buddha sets. How can I approach them in a way that they lead to the development of metta?
Yeah, I think you are somebody who wants to be an A student, and you think that by trying or being anxious that it will get you an A, but it doesn't. And this is something that no matter how your anxiety that you might not be a good student here, it is not helpful. It won't make you a good student. So you might as well drop the anxiety and the pressure and the fear, because it doesn't help. In fact, it makes it worse. So yes, the standards that the Buddha has are extraordinarily high. They're as high as a human. This is the nature of the Buddha. He's very wise, and he knows that humans actually aspire to the highest possibility. So that's why people climb Everest, and then they climb it without oxygen, and then they climb it solo, and they sail the seas, and they go to other planets, and they do ultramarathon. Humans are motivated by these things, but the highest of all of these things is this process towards enlightenment. So yes, it is an ultimate standard. It's an ultimate goal in human existence. Full enlightenment is the end of evolution. It's the end of the process. It's all that can be done. So It's not surprising that you think it's a high standard. It is. But you will simply, if you go to a music college and you want to be a concert pianist, your music teacher, and that's a very, very high demand structure. Only a few people can really pull it off at the A level. It won't help you to be anxious, and it won't help you to be tense or anything like this. What'll help you is to practice, and to practice with the right level of ease and attention. And that's how you get it done, not by being anxious or pressured, but by being inspired and aspiring to the highest possibility. That's how it gets done. So you can just put your sense of pressure and your anxiety aside and say, that is the first thing I need to get rid of is the sense of pressure and anxiety. I need to get on with it, but it is moving towards joy and ease, and that's I need to find joy and ease in order to get to joy and ease. Gandhi had a saying, there is no way to peace. Peace is the way. So think about that.
Our next question is from Travis in Vancouver. Ajahn, what is your view of nirvana? Is it permanent or impermanent?
Nibana, nirvana is the Sanskrit form, and that's usually the pronunciation in the Mahayana schools, and nibana is the pronunciation in the southern schools, the Theravada schools. And it is said to be unconditioned, and it's not anicca, it's not impermanent. So all things are anicca, but nibana is nicca, permanent. And so, but the question is, what is nibana? It's easy to say it's permanent, but what is it? Well, it's not a place, and it's not something like space itself. By the way, in the analytical schools of Buddhism, and what are called Dhamma, they talk about things that are permanent, and one of the things that they discuss is space permanent? Is anything outside of impermanence? And some of them assert that space itself is permanent. Great. How nice to know. And you will have actually discussions say from the 17th century on in the West about the nature of space as well. So I think Newton held the idea that space is an independent element. It's not, and then you get into Einsteinian kind of things where space is no other than time, and it's not something separate from the universe. It's not an independent element of the universe. It has form and shape, etc. So these are philosophical discussions which are almost irrelevant to ultimately what we're after here with human happiness and well-being and the end of suffering. So Nibbana is, the first thing we can say about it is that it's the cessation and the final cessation of suffering, of greed, of hatred, and delusion. And its first experience is in this very life. So while one is a conscious living human being, one experiences the cessation of greed, hatred, and delusion. And what are you then? Are you just are you a machine then? Are you a robot that has nothing? You don't have greed, hatred, delusion, but you're just empty? No. So we also have a list of the factors of enlightenment. So one of the emotional elements they range from joy to deep serenity. And that's the emotional range that the enlightened person is in. They have irreversibly finished with greed, hatred, and delusion, and they are irreversibly abiding in a emotional structure of joy and ease. And the needle swings back and forth in the green zone. So you got a red zone and a green zone. The red zone is the negative greed, hatred, delusion, and the green zone is the positive, the enlightenment factors of joy and deep serenity. The needle stays in that zone, but it's not pinned on anything. It's not unchanging, it's flowing, but never falling out of that field of positive emotion. And so nibana is, it's the relationship it's the human experience of the cessation of suffering. And that's what it really means, is the cooling, the wind has died down, the problematic nature of life has ceased, never to arise again. So that's what it means. It's in emotional structures. How do you feel? Irreversibly liberated from suffering, emotional suffering. The body, though, is still there, and it can have painful feelings. The emotional reaction to the painful feelings is without distress. But until the death of that person, the body is still under the pressures of biological reality. And then that is, the death of that person is called nibana, the final nibana, the final cessation. And of course, everybody asks, well, then what? And that's one of the great questions you can explore. I advise you to not spend much time on it, but mostly to spend your time on asking yourself, how do I feel? Am I still plagued with greed, hatred, delusion, the negative emotions, depression, anger, all of these things, or am I free from this? And until I am, I should just get on with the process towards that. And my understanding of what that is, what is nibana, will be clarified for me by my experience rather than by conceptual ideas. Yeah. Well, do we have time for one more question? I think so.
I think we do, Ajahn.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. The final question will come from Juan in Liverpool, United Kingdom. Can I drink a glass of wine per week and keep following the precepts and meditation? Why can some monks indulge in eating or smoking and lay people are not allowed one occasional drink?
Yeah, that's unfair. Those monks get to smoke and eat. Well, I don't know about indulging in food and so forth, or smoking. I think smoking is a modern phenomenon, isn't it? I don't think they had tobacco in the time of the Buddha, but yes, it's true that a few monks did smoke and so forth. But anyway, what is primarily meant by the fifth precept is non-intoxication, so nothing that causes your mindfulness to lapse. And food doesn't cause your mindfulness to lapse. And I guess I've never, well, I must say I did smoke, but I quit when I was 8. And so I don't really know much about smoking, you know. And so I think a person who smokes cigarettes it's not an intoxicant in terms of their mental state. It is bad for your health, apparently. You know, it has all kinds of negative health issues, but it's not a mental intoxicant to diminish your mindfulness. And but wine beyond a thimbleful or so, I don't know, an ounce or something, depending on the alcoholic content, can be. So it's a matter of if, by the way, it's very specific for monks. Not even a tiny drop of alcohol is to be taken in any form. And if you do, it's a confessional offense. You must not do that, not even a little bit at all, period, 0. It's very clear for monks. That's the Vinaya. For lay people, it is The Buddha never says, well, a glass now and then is not going to. He never says that. You will not find that. But lay people want to say, but he didn't say, like for the monks, he didn't say only, not even a drop. But then the precept says, non-intoxication. So various people, take your choice. Don't fool yourself, though. He's saying, if you're aspiring to clarity, don't drink a glass of wine. So here's my little thing. You're going in for neurosurgery. You're going in for brain surgery. And the surgeon comes over you and says, this is a long operation. You mind if I drink a glass of wine while I'm doing this? I would say, I don't want you drinking a glass of wine, dude. I want you sharp as a tack. You're operating on my brain. What if I smoke a half a joint? No, I don't want you smoking half a joint. I want you clear and crisp. Well, what if I how about a cup of tea? I say, okay, cup of tea is fine. That won't decrease your clarity. How about a cup of coffee? Okay, it's all right. What if I'm a smoker and I'll feel a little craving, so I want to calm my nerves and everything. I'll step out of the room, have a cigarette, come back and finish it. I say, oh, fine, whatever. But you don't need a glass of wine, and it will affect your precision and understanding, so I would prefer you not to have that. So you are the neurosurgeon yourself, and you're operating on your own brain. And every thought and emotion you have is a way of changing your own brain. And you should not take a glass of wine while you're performing neurosurgery on yourself, because you're doing non-invasive surgery on yourself. The way you feel and think in life is affecting and changing your brain. And it's a very delicate thing, the brain and the mind. So you make the choice whether you want your neurosurgeon taking a glass of wine while he operates on your brain or not. So that's all I can say. That's my little story for this. So that's about it for today. I hope that you all are well and happy and peaceful in the midst of the pandemic and the new world war that we are undertaking now. So may you be well, having peaceful.